Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants. On behalf of the Ahmedabad Management Association, it's a pleasure to welcome our distinguished speaker, Ms. Kiran Mazumdar Shore, Ms. Hema Ravichandar, Mr. Govind Iyer, Geeta, all the participants to the 13th Lalita Iyer AMA annual lecture to be delivered by none other than distinguished Ms. Kiran Mazumdar Shore, who is the executive chairperson of Biocon Limited. As many of you are aware, this lecture is held under the auspices of the Dr. Lalita Iyer AMA Center for the Development of Women. This was set up by Mr. PVR Iyer in memory of his wife, Dr. Lalita Iyer, who was a gynecologist by profession and worked ceaselessly for the empowerment of women, predominantly from the labor areas. She also addressed a host of issues ranging from marital disharmony to gender disparity. She did not limit her counseling, to only women alone. Even men with issues concerning family relationships and other issues sought her help. Essentially, this center revolves around the fact that a world that is better for women is better for everyone. And this lecture is dedicated to perpetuate Dr. Lalita Iyer's memory, and she devoted her time for the cause of women empowerment. As I mentioned before we formally started, I remember very much Hema was there with Mrs. Anu Aga in, I think, 2004 during the inaugural lecture series. And over the years, we have had other distinguished speakers that include Dr. Kiran Bedi, Dr. Indu Shahai, Ranjana Kumar, Dr. Tessie Thomas, and Ms. Rohini Nilkani, and many other accomplished speakers over the years. So today being the 13th lecture. And regarding the center, other activities under the center include publishing relevant books, and we have conducted training programs relevant to women empowerment and delivered by accomplished trainers in this field, and they're attended by not only individual volunteers or young entrepreneurs, but by participants or volunteers from NGO like Seva, Aga Khan Rural Support Program, Chetna, Ahmedabad Women's Action Group, and many others. And yes, we very fondly remember Mr. PVR Iyer, our AMS past president, who passed away about 4 years ago. Besides AMS president in the 80s, he was subsequently the president of the All India Management Association. And he has mentored many persons, not only in his business, but in his various voluntary pursuits, one of the major ones being AMA. And I'm one of the fortunate ones who has worked very closely with him, even during my student days. And besides this activity center, AMA has got now about almost 50 activity centers. And besides this activity center, Mr. Iyer has set up 2 other activity centers at AMA, namely the PVR and AMA Research Center that promotes research. So because AMA has got a good library resources, and then we have certain research forums. We are guiding the PhD students, allowing them to use our resources. So this is one activity. And he also initiated the AMA Past President School of Grooming. And we are really very fortunate that both Govind and Geeta, and for the benefit of others, that is Mr. Iyer's son and daughter respectively, are playing a very active role in nurturing the center and getting very accomplished speakers each year. And of course, Govind himself has been involved in a lot of social work. I have taken a lot of time. So the format will be, Govind will formally do the welcome to the speakers and Hema, and then there will be the type will be, conversational, and then with a short question answer session moderated by Govind, they will end, by 7:30. Thank you all, and over to Govind.
Govind, you're on mute. Thank you, Devesh. Thank you very much for that, and thank you all for being here. Delightful to have a group of people from all over the world, and it's so nice. There's some from Australia as well, late in the night who have joined us. So I'll take just a couple of minutes and introduce both Kiran and Hema. I'm sure both of them are known to many on this call, but it's only due credit that I do introduce them. So Kiran Mazumdar Shaw is the executive chairperson of Biocon Limited. She's been a pioneering biotech entrepreneur, a healthcare visionary, and a global influencer. But what I also know her very well as is a passionate philanthropist. She's a pioneer of India's biotech industry and founder of Biocon. She's a proud recipient of two of India's highest civilian orders, the Padma Shri in 1989 and the Padma Bhushan in 2005. What's also really a tremendous recognition of achievements is this year she got the World Entrepreneur of the Year award, which is a testimony of her entrepreneurial journey for over 4 decades. She serves as a full-term member of the Board of Trustees of MIT in Boston, and she's also a lead independent director on Infosys and on Narayana Health. What's interesting is that she has a master's degree in malting and brewing. And I don't know from there how Biocon was formed, but I'm sure Kiran will tell us how malting and brewing led to Biocon. Finally, she's a very compassionate capitalism, and she follows what she believes is very important to give back to the country and to give back to the world. She's the first woman business leader from India to sign the Giving Pledge, an initiative of the Gates Foundation, committing to give the majority of her wealth to philanthropic causes. Thank you, Kiran, for being here. I know that your words of wisdom and also your guidance to this group will be fantastic. Hema Ravichandar is somebody that Geeta and I have known since the 70s, late 70s, when she was in Ahmedabad. And she and Ravi are very close to the family as well. As Divesh mentioned, she was in the first inaugural lecture that my father started in 2004. Hema is a strategic HR advisor with about 37 years of industry experience, working in many different companies and serving on many boards. Until 2005, she was the global head of HR for Infosys. And here she really made this a world-class organization during that period of time, scaling it from 250 employees to 40,000 employees. What's very interesting in the case of Hema is she spent over 20 years in executive coaching, mentoring, leadership development, has worked extensively with both business and functional leaders, and is doing a phenomenal work with board members and in transforming their leadership styles for maximum impact. She is seen as one of the 25 most powerful women in India and successful women professionals in IT. From an AMA perspective, she's an alumnus of the IIM Ahmedabad, which is just around the corner from AMS. And I thank you, Hema, for steering this conversation. And over to you to make this a lively, engaging conversation. The format we will be following is that Hema and Kiran will have a chat. Would welcome any questions from any of the members of this group. Feel free to put them in the Q&A that you might see the Zoom chat or on the chat group. It'll be better in the Q&A, but that's fine if you put it on the chat. And towards the last 15 minutes or so, I'll try and see if there's some interesting questions that we can then throw to Kiran or to Hema if there are any questions that need to be answered. But over to you, Hema. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Govind. And thank you, Ahmedabad Management Association, for inviting me to this 13th Dr. Lalita Iyer Memorial Lecture. This is a very special occasion for me for several reasons. As a friend of the family, I have personally known the amazing Dr. Lalita Iyer and experienced her warm hospitality in her gracious home in Ahmedabad. My husband and I have cherished our friendship with Mr. PVRN all these years. It is a pleasure to return back to Dr. Lalita Iyer Memorial Lecture for a second time after having been part of the inaugural one in 2004. And finally, to be in conversation with the amazing Kiran today on a topic that is so relevant to women, leaders, and society. Gender stereotypes and biases have long been internalized in our collective psyche. Hearing how they can be broken from, like Govind said, someone who is a global influencer, an entrepreneur, a biotechnologist, an urban reformer, and a compassionate capitalist is particularly meaningful. Someone who has shattered so many myths in her journey on a road less traveled. And speaking of roads, I can't resist mentioning that Ballarat University in Australia, where Kiran studied brew making, named a road in its Mount Helena campus as the Mazumdar Drive. So without more ado, let's start this conversation. Kiran, in a 2018 interview by the Harvard Business School, you say, and I quote, "I often say, do you know that India's largest biopharmaceutical company was founded because of a gender bias?" This so demonstrates your spirit of resilience. Do tell us, Kiran, what happened?
So first and foremost, Hema and Govind and Geeta, let me say how delighted I am to be invited to participate in this very important lecture series, the Lalita Iyer lecture series. And I must say that although I didn't have the pleasure of knowing your mother, I'm sure she must have been an amazing woman. And I think, today's time is about giving women their due. And let me start by talking about my own journey, which is how I want to answer Hema's question. Yes, I did say that India's largest biopharmaceutical company was started because of a gender bias. And why did I say that? It's because, as Govind, you said, I actually finished my college in Bangalore in zoology honors. And thanks to my late father, who kind of prodded me to go and do a master's in brewing science, I went to Australia. I actually topped my class in Australia. I came back thinking that, I was made for life because, I said I had done so well and that I would be a very sought after brewmaster when I come back to India. And I just took it for granted that I'd get a job and people would almost fight over me to give me a job. That's how arrogant I was. And so when I came back full of this confidence and sort of confidence that I could get a job, I was in for a rude shock because I knocked at many, many brewing doors and they all sort of shut it on me saying, "We just can't hire you. I mean, I know you're very competent, you're very qualified, and we'd love you to come and solve some of our problems for us, but we can't give you a job." And I said, "Why not?" Because they said, "This is not a job for a woman. I mean, if we hire you, you would be the only woman working in this brewery. It's not a safe environment for a woman. You will have to deal with, labor unions. We don't think that's a good job for a woman, etc., etc., etc." And even though I kept saying, "Look, I don't mind doing it. I don't mind taking on that challenge," they wouldn't, give me a job. So when I found that despite my qualifications, despite my competence, despite my self-belief, I couldn't get a job, it was a rude shock for me. And I realized that India had a huge gender bias. It was an accidental encounter with an Irish biotech entrepreneur that got me to start Biocon. And let me tell you that even when the Irish biotech entrepreneur tracked me down in Bangalore, in India, in Baroda actually at that time, he actually, tracked me down and gave me this big, opportunity. He said, "Look, I want to start a biotech company in India making enzymes. I've heard about you, and why don't you partner me in this endeavor?" And my immediate response was, "Well, I don't think I'm the right partner because I'm a woman. And, I don't have money to my name. I don't have business experience. I've just been told that India is a very hostile country for women in business or women in management. So I don't think I'm the right partner. Let me introduce you to a man who can be a better partner." And I actually tried very hard to introduce him to someone else. But then he kind of threw the challenge at me saying, "Why are you so diffident? I mean, I see in you a very confident young woman, and yet you don't want to, take up this opportunity. It's a very exciting opportunity." So with that, I finally kind of succumbed and said, "Why not? Let me give it a shot." So that's how I started Biocon. And of course, I started it in a very frugal way. I started it in my garage. My garage was my office. And I had only 10,000 rupees in the bank. And, I must tell you that my first few years were very, very difficult, because I realized that being a woman, I had to start building credibility, because women had huge credibility hurdles. Banks didn't want to lend to me. People didn't want to work for a woman employer. And I'll tell you why all these credibility challenges were something I hadn't realized. For instance, I was 25 years old, so people didn't take me seriously. I had absolutely no business background or a sugar daddy to give me a huge amount of money. So I had no collateral to offer any bank. And I was trying to start a strange business called biotechnology that nobody understood.
But Kiran, this may have been a complete contrast to what your growing up years were, right? Your very, very inspirational father, who returned to the country to become India's first Indian brewmaster. Your mother, who was a partner, who I believe typed one of your project reports on her Remington Ran and drove you to the first project meeting. And in later years, John, of course, how can we describe him? He's indescribable, So how did you handle that contrast, your growing up years and these kind of challenges that you faced as you started Biocon?
So, Hema, my parents have always supported me. They were my greatest supporters, even when I was going through bad times. In fact, my father said to me, he said, these breweries are so stupid. They don't know what they're missing out by not hiring you. And, when I started my business, of course, as I said, my mother said, tell me what I can do for you. And she would drive me to all these offices where I had to go to Udyog Bhavan and to all these little offices to get this permission and that permission. In fact, I started Biocon during the height of the license Raj. So obviously, it was not an easy time to start a business. But it was my mother who basically drove me around. If I had to type out some report, she would do it. And of course, my father was always the eternal believer that his daughter was smart enough to do anything. I just had this amazing support from my family. My brothers, of course, believed in me. My parents believed in me. And of course, later on in life, when I married John, he was my biggest support. In fact, he came into my life when Biocon was quite a successful company. And, we were actually transitioning from the enzymes business to the biopharmaceutical business. And that was the time when I married John. And I had to buy out Unilever at that time. And it was John who actually helped me do that, because he actually sold his life's savings, which was a very expensive, townhouse in Chelsea in London. And he used those savings to actually buy out Unilever for me. And he always jokes with me saying, I thought by marrying an Indian woman, I would get a dowry. But in fact, you were the one who, made me give you a dowry. But he always says that was the best investment I ever made in my life, was to buy that stock of Unilever in Biocon. So I think, he was a financial brain. He helped me a lot when we went public. So, and at the same time, he said, it's your company. I want to stay in the background. So you go ahead and lead the company, but I'll support you in every way. So we had a perfect understanding. So I think
there's a beautiful quote I read, Kiran. There's a beautiful quote I read, and it kind of exemplifies this point so beautifully. He says, there is one star in the family. That is my wife. There is no room for two.
Well, that's John.
The support system, John.
Because that's how he believes in everything. And he said, when I got married, I said, I'm going to now drop my Mazumdar. And he said, no, don't do that, because you're known as Kiran Mazumdar. You can call yourself Kiran Mazumdar Shaw if you want, but even if you don't call yourself Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, don't drop the Mazumdar. But I decided to have the hyphenated Mazumdar Shaw.
Beautiful. And also frugality. I think he said always that be ambitious in your business ideas, but be very conservative in your finance. I think that's a John message too, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, he's Scottish after all. So, so he used to always tell me, don't waste money. Don't be, sort of extravagant. Be frugal. Be very, ambitious, but be cautious in terms of the way you go about financing your ambition. So that's something which he taught me, and I really think that's very important. And that's why he always told me, don't leverage the company like other companies do. Keep it as debt-free as possible. And so those are some of the tenets I also go by even today.
And what about the larger family? You were telling us about the next gen some time ago, the nephews, your brothers, of course. They must have also played a large role in the ecosystem and the creating of Kiran Mazumdar Show.
Well, I have two, we're a very close-knit family. I have two brothers, one who is 2 years younger than me and the other who is 11 years younger than me. So he's a baby of the family. But Ravi, the one who's younger than me, and I are very, very close. And Dev is, of course, someone I look at as almost like the baby of the family. And I almost mother him most of the time. But they have been my greatest supporters, as you can imagine. And what is even more important is their children. So I think Ravi's children, Claire, who is now a young mother, and she's also running a startup company in Boston, and her younger brother Eric, who are really the like my own children. And of course my Dev's son Stefan is another very bright young man who's sort of aspiring to be a fashion designer. So whilst Claire is the only one who took after me, she's a PhD in immuno-oncology from Stanford, and she did her Stanford Business School. Eric is a very bright young man who did his computer science and AI in Berkeley, a PhD program. And I must tell you about young Eric. When he was 6 years old, as all children were asked a question about what would you do if you found a pot of gold? And he wrote, if I found a pot of gold, I'd give it to my aunt so that her company can make good medicines for bad diseases. And I mean, I just thought that was so prophetic, And then later on, when he got into MIT, you have to write essays when you apply to these Ivy, for any college for that matter in the US. And he wrote that my heroes are women, because he talked about his mother, he talked about his aunt, that's me, and his sister. And he talked about how each one of us were power women in his life, and how he's so influenced by strong women, and how much he respects women. And I think that is so important, Hema, in today's day and age, and especially relevant to this particular lecture, because I think it's about how we perceive women, how we respect women, and how we give women their respect. I think that is very important in today's day and age. I was so delighted that this year, 3 women won Nobel Prizes in physics and chemistry. And of course, we had a 4th woman who won the literature prize. So I just think that I always tell young women, I said, science and technology is agnostic to gender. Yeah. And I think you must understand that if you are playing in the knowledge economy, you must have that confidence that you can actually compete on equal status, because you must never think of yourself inferior when it comes to brains. Yes, there is this eternal question of brain and brawn, but I think here in the knowledge economy, it's brains that count. And I think women should never believe that they're inferior to men, because we can see it in our education. You look at the way women excel at education. Women excel at anything they put their minds to. But the problem is we also are very diffident about, competing with men. And that is something we must learn to overcome.
Yeah. Kiran, I want to just, take a little detour and go into the professional world. and talk about some of your professional colleagues and the kind of influence they had on your life as you started this journey, as you started the biotech journey, as you literally pioneered in that space. And
so, Hema, it's very interesting. When I first tried to hire people, I told you people didn't want to work for a woman.
yeah,
They felt that it was a huge jobs, there was a lack of job security. They felt that working for a woman would not give them job security. So my first two employees were retired tractor mechanics who needed the money, more than anything else. But thereafter, when I started building the company professionally, I actually started meeting a lot of very, very interesting people. So, I met a young engineer, a chemical engineer from IIT in Chennai, in Madras. Actually, it's still called IIT Madras, but he was actually doing his chemical engineering in Madras, and then he went on to doing his MTech in Delhi, and he was working on biochemical processes. So he would come and discuss what he was doing, and I was very excited, and I would actually help him with his projects. And he finally joined me and became my R&D head. The second person was another engineer from IIT. He read about me in a magazine, and he came and said, "Hey, listen, I'm so excited with what you're doing. I'd love to join you." I said, "Listen, I can't pay you very much." He said, "Doesn't matter. I just want to join this very exciting company." So, I was a startup, and it was very exciting for me to meet these young engineers who wanted to join me in my journey in terms of what I was doing. And then finally, of course, I also, met this amazing, brilliant biochemical engineer from MIT, who later on became my CEO. And he too basically came to India after he finished his, as he was finishing his PhD to look for a job. He was very keen to come back to India. And I remember he interviewed with many, many companies, and he came and interviewed with us, and he was very sold on what we were doing. And I remember my other colleagues and me said, "Do you think he'll join us?" And he says, "Well, let's make him an offer. He might and may not. Maybe we are too small for him." So I made him an offer, and he said, "Oh, it's fine. I'm going to join you." And then later on, I found that he had got a bigger offer from Hindustan Lever. So I thought, oh, he's not going to join us. And a few months later, he sent me a message saying, "Hey, what happened? You were supposed to give me an offer letter." I said, "Well, I thought you wouldn't join us." And he said, "No, I made up my mind. I'm only joining you. It's not for the money. It's because of what you're doing that I want to join you." Mm. So I ended up creating this amazing team of founding team, as I called it, who were people who believed in what I was doing, who were excited with experimenting, with innovating, with building India's first biotech company, so to speak, So I think you must, when you're on this journey of building a company, you must find the right team. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate to have found the right team.
So both in the personal and in the professional, I think that was amazing. And I think that is a great story. In Seema's book, Seema Singh's book on you and the Indian biotech industry, she titles it The Myth Breakers. And one myth you, of course, talked to us about, that women are not sustainable employers. But what were some of the other myths that you had to break as you went about this journey?
So, Hema, you will sort of understand this, and I'm sure Geeta will also, empathize with these kind of myths, They always believe that women are not risk takers. Hmm. Women are not ambitious enough. Women don't think big. Women are not fiercely competitive. These are the kind of things that are the reasons given for not investing in women. So very often, if you go to VCs, and if there's a woman who's starting a company and a man who's starting a company, and finally the money goes to the man, I always ask the VC, why did you not give it to the woman? He says, "No, I don't think she's tough enough and ambitious enough to really build this business." And I said, "That's rubbish." I said, "Why are you jumping to such conclusions?" But I realized that that's also what was thought of me. that I'm not a risk taker. I don't think big. I'm not competitive enough. And people used to judge me in that way because I was doing something so different, so unique that, I didn't have to compete with others because till they kind of came on the scene. And of course, I was building my business brick by brick because it was a new business and I had to build it in a certain way. But very soon, when I did, sort of break those myths, where I showed people what a risk taker I was. The fact that I was building new technologies, that I actually patented technologies. And when I used to go to the banks to ask them to help me build these, technologies, they would say to me, that's very risky. And I would think to myself, and they call me not a risk taker? Come on. I would tell them, look, biotech is about innovating, and I've got to take this risk, because if I don't take this risk, then what's my business all about? So I think I have demonstrated time and time again that I have taken big risks, much bigger risks than my male counterparts. When it comes to basically challenging the status quo, I've done that all the time. Okay. When it's come to being competitive, I'm fiercely competitive. I'm a fierce negotiator. In fact, one of the biggest compliments was paid to me by the chairman of Mylan, who is my partner in the US. He is considered to be the toughest negotiator in the US in the pharma world. And I remember in that same book that you mentioned, Seema Singh, he actually acknowledges the fact that Kiran is the toughest negotiator I've ever met. And I thought that was a big compliment coming from such a tough negotiator like him. So I think I'm very competitive. I'm a tough negotiator. I'm a very fair person. I think in terms of my business values, I'm very fair. I want an equitable partnership. I demand fairness in my business. So I think those are some of the things which I think I have broken a lot of myths about what women are all about. And of course, I have done it my way. Let's put it that way. So I think they always say women don't think big. And I've always thought big. I've always thought globally. I've always built global scale. And I always tell women, I said, the difference I find between men and women is men are able to sell a small idea as a big idea. And women, unfortunately, even if they have a big idea, they make it sound small. So I think that is what we need to do. I think women need to tell their story and sell their ideas as big ideas.
So true. And there are so many women on this conversation, on this talk, so many leaders, so many shapers of society. So what would be your message to them to make whatever career they choose to be a success? What would you say?
So first and foremost, I think, Hema, my message to a lot of women is, please be serious about your careers. Please try and aim high when it comes to your career paths. And please don't think that you have to only, sort of resign yourself to doing small things, take on small responsibilities, or if you're building a business that you have to take small opportunities. No, I think women have to find their potential, and you've got to think big, whatever it is, whether it is your career, whether it is the leadership role you want to play, or whether it is the business you want to build. I think aiming high is extremely important for every woman, because I do believe that every woman can do it.
And you were talking about this issue of there being quiet leaders versus their ability to speak up in one of the conversations we had earlier. And I want you to touch upon that, because I think that's a very powerful idea. And coming from you, it'll be really super powerful.
I just find that whenever there is a room full of men and women, women tend to listen a lot. They don't speak up too much. And all the time you hear male voices speaking up, sharing an idea, making a comment. I would like more women's voices to be heard. wherever that is, whether it's in a boardroom, whether it's in a conference room, whether it is at a public forum of a roundtable discussion. I think we first need to see more women participating in those discussions, and they must speak up. Their voices must be heard. I often find women keep quiet. They don't ask questions. They listen a lot. They're good listeners, but after the whole thing is over, they might come up with a very important point of view, which they should have said at the meeting. But they very often say it afterwards, just to a colleague, saying, actually, I was listening to that, and I wonder if this is not a better way of doing it. And I would say, well, that's a great point, but why didn't you speak up? So I think women must speak up. Women must let themselves participate on an equal footing with other male colleagues or other colleagues. And I think that's very important. And I also believe that we must have more women in boardrooms or in any kind of, setting, because if you don't have that perspective that women bring to many, many issues, you're missing out on a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very important, that speaking up and shaping your thoughts before you speak up is, I think, how you put it once in a speech.
You got to shape your thoughts. That's a very important point you made, Hema, because I think women feel very diffident speaking up because they think maybe it's a silly comment. But if you actually understand that subject and you shape your thought properly, you can make a big impact.
Yeah. What about mentorship, Kiran? I'm sure you've sought out mentors. You've had mentors through of course, I think John is an amazing mentor. But apart from that, in the professional world, in the larger ecosystem, how have you viewed mentorship?
So, there's only one mentor I acknowledge all the time, and that is Mr. Vagul. To me, who are mentors? I have many mentors, by the way, but the people I consider mentors are the people I brainstorm with, people whom I exchange ideas with. That's what to me is mentorship. Mentorship is not about what people look at, saying, what do you think I should do? Do you think this is a good idea? I don't think that's mentorship, because that doesn't build you, that doesn't evolve you, that doesn't grow you. I believe that mentorship is about discussing an exciting idea with somebody whom you respect and saying what do you think they are saying about it. And I used to do that with Mr. Vagul. I used to talk to him about, the new technologies I was developing and what I was doing with biotech and what is this new enzyme I'm trying to develop. And he used to be fascinated. So he used to sit and make time for me, saying, tell me about this new enzyme you're developing. How does it work? What does it do? And I would tell him all these things. And one day, I remember he had called me again to listen to what else I was doing. And I went very disillusioned and told him, I said, Mr. Vagul, I'm so depressed. I'm so disillusioned. I have this fabulous technology that I've developed. It's a homegrown technology. I've patented it. I think it can be world beating. And yet I'm not able to find any finance for it, because the Karnataka State Financial Corporation is telling me it's too high risk. Why are you trying to develop your own homegrown technology? Can you guarantee that it will work? And I said, well, obviously, there's a risk, but I'm sure that even if it doesn't work the first time, I'll have to tweak it and it will work. They said, no, we are not willing to take such risks. Why don't you do what other companies are doing? Those were in the 80s, right? They all are licensing technologies from abroad. Why don't you do that? I said, no, but that's not my business. My business is about innovation. It's about developing my own technology. So you must invest in it. And I was telling Mr. Vagul, see, these people are not willing to finance me because they think it's very high risk. And then Mr. Vagul said to me, it's music to my ears, because I've just started a technology development fund. And he says, I'm going to finance this idea of yours, this technology of yours, because it's exactly what it needs to be. He was the first guy who thought about venture funding. And he said, I'm not giving you a loan, I'm going to invest in your company. I said, wow, that's fantastic. So you mean I don't have to pay interest? I don't have to do this? He said, no, I'm going to take a stake in your company. And of course, that was an inflection point in my journey, because that investment that Mr. Vagul made in Biocon in the late 80s was something he cashed out in less than a year's time for 4 times what he had invested, because, you know, Unilever came and acquired my Irish partners, and they found that the most valuable part of that investment was the company in India and the technology that I had developed. So, you know, that was the first eureka moment for me to understand that this is very valuable, that innovation and technology development can generate huge value. So, you know, he was a great mentor. Then later on, of course, Professor Mashelkar was a great mentor, because, you know, he and I used to brainstorm about how do we make India patent literate? How do we basically get Indian, you know, scientists to innovate? How do we create incubators in our scientific institutions? We used to have wonderful times. And he used to be always very excited with what I was doing. And I would brainstorm again with him saying, I'm trying to do this. What do you think? Is it a good idea? And in latter years, of course, I have Mr. Vagul's brother, Bala Manyan, who's a very, you know, dear friend. And he's someone, I think we both consider each other mentors, because we brainstorm so much that he will bounce ideas of me and I will bounce ideas of him. And I think that's what mentorship is about. Mentorship is about brainstorming. It's about testing ideas. It is about experimenting with new ideas with someone whom you respect and whose intellectual, you know, thoughts you respect. That's to me what mentorship is.
I think you are a virtual mentor to many professionals, and of course women. And there's one question which I'm seeing, which I have to ask you at this context, which is, what is your advice for undergraduate biotech, bioscience students, career advice? What would you give at this point of time? Anything special that you would like to give them?
First and foremost, you know, Hema, there is no, you know, people often ask me this question, and I said, I can't answer it for you. You have to tell me what interests you. You have to tell me what excites you. And what is it about biology that excites you? And what is that one idea that you want to nurture and grow and make it into a great opportunity? So I often tell young scientists, you have to figure it out. I'm not going to tell you how to figure it out, because you can only bounce that idea off me. So most of the young women who come to me saying, what do you think we should do? The question I ask them is, what is it that interests you? Are you interested in, you know, what aspect of biology? I was very interested in fermentation science. Does that interest you? Does immunology interest you? What is it about biology that interests you? And based on that, I think, you know, people can make a career of it or an opportunity of it. So to me, that's extremely important, because I think it's about people shaping their own interests, their own ideas. No one else should be shaping it for you. You can always ask for questions. You can always ask questions to people about something that you want to validate. But I don't think you should be asking people for what should I do? Because if you don't know what to do, then you're a lost person.
True, touche. So, you know, in that context, you know, this much hackneyed topic about work-life balance. What is your perspective? And there is a question, you know, in the question box. So I just want to, and especially in these times of COVID, you know, when work comes into home and home goes into work, and there are colleagues who feel that working long hours is the only key to success. So what is your perspective on this whole work-life balance that many, especially women, kind of confront themselves with?
I've always considered work as an integral part of my life. I've also felt that you've got to pick your priorities, you know. Family comes first for me. So anytime there is a family...
Was it always like that, Kiran? Was it always like that?
Always, always. I mean, today I can tell you, you know, I remember 2 very good examples. You know, when my husband John was diagnosed with cancer, I gave up everything and I took 2 months off to go and treat his cancer. Okay. And it didn't matter to me, because I knew I had people to run the business. And I said, look, in those days, I mean, when it happened, it was not the time of this kind of digital age, but we still had phones, right? So I could always speak to my colleagues and they could reach me. But that was a very important priority for me. So that was something I prioritized on. Today, if I'm having a family celebration and there is a very urgent business need that requires me here rather than at the family celebration, I would actually have to pick the business crisis as my priority. So very often I missed out on going for a friend's daughter's wedding, for instance, because I had a urgent business crisis which I had to attend to. I missed out on cousins' weddings because of such business priorities. I think in life, it's about priorities. And at every stage of your life, you have to choose those priorities well. What is important for you? What is it that you can do and can't do at that point in time? So to me, I always pick on, the work-life balance as a balance in terms of prioritizing your life at any given point in time. That's to me my work-life balance. And in terms of COVID, I think, again, it's very important to make sure that you don't overwork yourself. In fact, I find I overwork myself because these Zoom chats are becoming crazy. You know, you can keep having back-to-back Zoom chats till 11 o'clock at night because now the world doesn't sleep for you, right? In the past, it was almost expected that you had to be physically present. Today, everyone wants you to be virtual. So I get requests from, like 6 o'clock in the morning till midnight. And then I have to prioritize saying, which of those meetings am I going to say no to? Because I can't be doing that every day. I might do it one day a month or 1 day, 2 days a month. But I am not going to have those kind of crazy work hours every day of the month. So I make it a point that at least 3 days a week, I spend it with John and my mother at home because I need to be with them. We watch a film, whatever we do, I spend time with them. But the other times I might not be able to do it every day of the week. So I do have to attend to these, to various calls. So I think, again, even during COVID, you must learn to prioritize. Make some time for yourself. Make some time for the home and for your work in a prioritized way.
You've talked about...
Just 1 minute. I want to just build on the question of COVID just for a minute. There was a question about how did you cope with COVID in August? And I know that's something that it'll be very, very useful for us.
Yeah, so, you can imagine when I found that I had COVID, I was not unduly perturbed because I said, look, I am a biotech person. I should know how to manage this thing. I know I'm not feeling that ill. So I'm sure if I track myself in a proper way, if I need to go to hospital, I will. But right now I know I don't need to go to the hospital. So what I did was, of course, I completely isolated myself. Of course, thanks to technology, I still did Zoom calls even throughout my COVID phase. And I still went for, I did go for walks every day. I made sure that I walked every day. I have a nice big garden, so I could go for a walk, put on my mask, and I went for a walk. Of course, I would not go anywhere near people because that was very important. I did all the things that I thought were important for me to deal with COVID. And finally, when I came out, and of course because I have a lab at my disposal, I could track my inflammatory markers and know that they were not at all elevated. So I said, well, I'm not going to have a serious disease. I'll probably have a mild form of the disease. I actually have had much worse flus, I can tell you that. So I went through a mild bout of COVID. I went out of it very well. I came out of it very well. And now at least I feel safe enough to go about my work in a way that I'm sure many people are envious of.
Yeah. You talked about how you broke the stereotypes in your own career, but Kiran, can you tell us a little bit about Biocon and how you've broken this in Biocon and in the other organizations that you help? How have you gone about setting a culture that helps break leading by example is of course one thing, but the larger.
So, my management style is very, very different to most people who practice a kind of a conventional management style. Because I built the company as an entrepreneur who had no business education whatsoever, I decided that I was going to build a company where I build a company of problem solvers. So I don't believe in delegating tasks. I believe in delegating problems. So I basically look at situation and I say, hey, solve this problem, solve that problem. And so I've created a company of problem solvers. And I think when you solve problems, you get very confident of your capabilities. And that's what I want to see in people. Bringing out the best in people is to get them to solve a problem. So give them a challenge, give them a problem and see how they solve it or overcome the challenge. And that to me builds a lot of confidence in people, and that creates good companies. That's been my approach. And because we are an innovation-led company, I need people to take on these kind of challenges and to think out of the box and to look at a problem saying, how do we solve this problem? So I think that is very important for innovation-led companies.
There is always a comment that men find it easier to network than women. And networking is very critical for women to succeed. So there's a question here actually. Is it tougher for women to network?
Hema, I am a great networker.
Yeah.
And I think I have a huge network. I mean, a lot of people say, my God, how do you know so many people? I think women are actually good at networking, but we feel shy. I think you're a great networker, Hema. I'm sure Geeta is a great networker. I don't know Geeta that well, but I'm sure she is. I think all of us are naturally adept at making friends, at connecting with people. Women are actually gregarious by nature, okay? And I think what is networking all about? It's about making friends. It's about having talks. It's about having discussions. I have a huge network of men and women. And, I really think that it doesn't take much to network. So even though men are great networkers, I think women can also be great networkers.
So they should do it. They should
do it, because I think one of my big strengths is my network. Because I make friends very easily. I'm very gregarious, and I love meeting people and talking to people and interacting with people. And I'm perfectly at ease speaking to Nobel laureates as I am speaking to a young upcoming startup.
So, so that's a segue into my next question. How does Kiran rejuvenate herself? How does she relax? How does she wake up to face another day with that same kind of enthusiasm and joie de vivre?
Well, my day-to-day energy comes from a sense of purpose. I'm trying to do so much, and I really wish I was younger, because I want to change the world. I want to, leave my stamp on the healthcare world, because I really think that my whole mission of providing affordable access to life-saving and essential medicines is something I want to really do for Biocon, and that's my legacy. And when it comes to doing all that, I don't need to sort of be rejuvenated, because that sense of purpose itself is very invigorating. But when it comes to sort of taking a break, which I think all of us need to take a break from time to time to bring in that extra energy, I like to spend it with my family on holidays. I take 2 or 3 weeks off. Generally over Christmas. This time I don't know what I'm going to do, whether I'll be able to even get out of Bangalore. But otherwise we take wonderful vacations together, and that to me is very rejuvenating. When I spend time with my niece and nephews and my brothers and their families, my sister-in-law and I are very close. And then we have very dear friends in different parts of the world. So, you know, I like to spend time with them as well. So I think I relax by the spending time with the people that that mean a lot to me.
You know, I think I've also heard that you meticulously plan events for the family, for these vacations, for these outings. And I think that you bring your whole program, management detail, the attention to detail, wanting to have that be the perfectionist to detail in all of these events. So I think that makes it extra special for everybody who participates in them. So I think that's, Kiran, really for you, for everyone who joined in to hear this conversation. I want to say here, the sustainable employer, if anybody thought that women are not sustainable employers, a big risk taker, ambitious and strong negotiator, fiercely competitive, status quo challenger, and shaper of her own interests for those students who are interested in biotech. But she's also an amazing host, a very thoughtful and loyal friend, and an art connoisseur par excellence. But that's for another discussion.
You know, Hema, that's another thing I want to mention to a lot of the viewers. I think you must have varied interests. That's another way of rejuvenating yourself. You know, that's a very important point you brought up. How do I rejuvenate myself on a day-to-day basis? I love art. I love reading. I love music. You know, I really enjoy these things. I used to even act at one time. I don't think a lot of people realize that when I started Biocon, I actually acted for Arjun Sajnani in his play, Amadeus. And Arjun often jokes with me. He said, I can't imagine I used to bully you, because he used to say, oh, can I take tomorrow off, next week off, I have to go to Bombay for a meeting. He said, no, you can't do anything till you finish my play. So, you know, those were the days where I used to enjoy acting, and therefore I enjoy plays, you know, and of course I enjoy classical music. I used to sing Hindustani classical. A lot of people don't realize that. So I have a lot of varied interests, and I enjoy all of that.
Yeah, so, and you know, I can vouch for the amazing host, the loyal friend. I've seen the parties you host for many of your dear friends, and you've kept in touch with your school friends, your college friends. I'm sure your friends from Australia and from all over the world. You know, but you know, Govind and Geeta, that's the topics for another fireside conversation.
Right.
But I know there are lots and lots of questions coming up. And
yeah, we have about 30 questions, Kiran. Get ready.
Govind. Over to you, Govind, for those.
Get ready for many questions. So I'll go in kind of the order that came in. So one of the questions is, what do you see as the source of inherent diffidence that women have? The point you raised earlier, Kiran. This is the question that came up.
So I think society has kind of filled our minds with the fact that women have certain traits which don't allow them to participate on an equal footing with men. And that's something which we've grown up with. That, you know, as I said to you, I've gone through it myself, you know, that women are diffident, that women are shy, that women can't do this and that, and this job is not for a woman. And, you know, we have to break all those myths. I mean, even in the workplace, I myself have been guilty of, gender typing certain jobs. And I'm saying, why? I mean, today, for instance, I'm pushing my guys saying, look, this sales job in selling pharma products, why should it be men? Yeah? Why can't you get women sales managers? Why must you only get men? See, we are all very stereotyped into thinking what men can do and what women can't do. Secondly, oh, women can't do this job because it will take late, you know, they have to do late night, so they won't be able to do this. It's not safe for a woman. It's very risky for a woman. I think all this has to be busted.
Yeah. And linked to that is an interesting question. What's the role, like you mentioned about John and your father and your brothers, what's the role men can play to really help women go out and do a lot more for themselves?
I think you have to support your women. I think if men don't support women, then women find it very difficult, and they actually resign themselves into the kind of myths that we have, and stereotyping them, I mean, they get stereotyped because of the lack of support from their own male members of the family. So I think husbands have to support support women. I think fathers have to support their daughters. Brothers have to support their sisters. I mean, I know that in Biocon itself, I have a lot of strong women leaders, by the way. You know, my head of Corpcom is a very strong woman. My own secretary is a very strong woman.
Yeah,
I mean, all
that.
of them have got very
I work with
supportive
Lata.
husbands. Huh?
I work with Lata. I know how strong she is.
Yeah.
Yeah, another question that came up. Go ahead, Hema.
Your head of CSR is a strong woman.
Absolutely. Pratima is a very strong woman. We've all grown up together. So.
I know. Sorry.
Another question that really is relevant for this audience is, you know, is there a difference between an Indian educated woman compared to a Western educated woman in terms of candid, forthrightness, aggressive, confidence, some of the terms that you used earlier? Do you find there's any difference? You work globally.
So, you know, Govind, that's a bit of an unfair question, but I'll answer it nevertheless. Basically, we have grown up in a society that doesn't give us the kind of freedom that many of those Western societies provide to their women. And to that extent, I think Indian women are at a bit of a disadvantage. But when they are given the opportunity, believe me, Indian women are no less.
Great.
Govind, I want to ask one more question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, Kiran, when Mr. Iyer, PVRN Iyer, started this talk series, he intended it originally for women who return back to the workspace.
That's right.
You know, after the 3 M's, so marriage, maternity, mobility, whatever. I want to ask you, you know, for returning women professionals, is there anything that you would say? Because, you know, there's a loss of confidence. They've been away from that fast track. Is there anything that they should do?
So first and foremost, there are two things we can do now, okay? One of the things is, you know, that COVID has brought in this work from home, remote working kind of format. And I think a lot of women who take maternity leave can actually not have that gap. They can actually take on, you know, their roles home. You know, they don't have to come to work, so to speak. But in the past, what I think we used to do is that any woman who wants to return back and who's had a break, you need to support that woman with some amount of skills that allow her to quickly catch up what she has missed and then come back to work. So you have to handhold her a little bit with giving her that extra coaching to resume that job. You know, I've had many women, by the way, who have taken a 2-year sabbatical to adopt a child and raise a child, or even a long maternity leave. And many of them have come back and, you know, they haven't really lost a lot of their skills, but they've also asked me to give them some help to resume some of their skills and responsibilities, which we have.
Actually,
so I think companies do need to spend, companies do need to spend some time and thought into how they allow women who have taken a long break to come back to their old jobs and resume them. Of course, the only thing that what women find, which they accept much better than men, is that obviously they will see some of their junior colleagues moving to a higher level, and they kind of have to move back to a lower level. So that is a bit unfair. So I think we also need to find a way of giving them that opportunity to quickly catch up.
Mr. Vagul, whom you mentioned earlier, is very well known in industry for having supported many women through these breaks. And I think,
in fact, all the women who led banks were from Mr. Vagul's nurturing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, whether it is Shikha Sharma, or whether it is Lalita Gupte or Kalpana Morparia, or, you know, Renuka Ramanathan or Chanda Kochar, they all, you know, were nurtured by Mr. Vagul.
Yeah.
So there's one question from an entrepreneur who's running a very successful business, whom I know quite well, Kiran, who's asked this question: what were advantages of just being a woman? And what have been the occasions where you felt defeated, and what helped you keep going?
So initially, as a woman entrepreneur, actually I had a lot of advantages because I was so unique that a lot of government officials used to almost feel sorry for me and help me. So I used to take full advantage of that. And very often these men used to complain, because we'd all go to meet the industry's commissioner and we'd be in the waiting area, and suddenly that peon would call me first, even if I've come a little later. And all these guys would say, "Hey, what is this? We have come so early and you take her in first." I said, "Well, I'm the only woman here and maybe that's why they've called me in first." So I used to get all those advantages. But on a more serious note, I would say that it is very tough being a woman, okay? Because let me tell you that people don't hesitate to criticize you, okay? Especially if you're a successful woman. And I've seen it. I remember when I was starting my biosimilars business, I was criticized by analysts, by investors. They called me very irresponsible at many times. They would say, "Why are you betting the bank on developing biosimilars where there is no guarantee that there will be regulatory approvals for such biosimilars? You're betting the bank. This is very risky. And you have no clue of how to run your business." I used to be even given these gender insults saying, women don't know how to run businesses. And you should understand that you should look at your male colleagues and see how successful they are and run your business by emulating them. These are some of the very nasty comments I got. So it's not easy being a woman who runs a big business, and you constantly get compared to men who are successful, and only when you succeed they say, "Oh, she's shown to us that she's equally capable of competing." But while you're trying to build your success story, believe me, there are enough critics. So I want women to know that it is unfair, and because there are very few of us, the spotlight is on women. And that's why you get ticked off and criticized and noticed for every little wrongdoing. So if you make one false step and you don't succeed, then you're almost criticized as a write-off, saying that, "Oh, she doesn't know how to run her business."
And just building on that, is there a way to get more women in public and government enterprises? This is a question that's come up. You're very, very prominent in Bangalore and around India. But is there
I
anything
really think women who have been given that responsibility have all done very well. Whether it's in government, whether it's in private sector, whenever you give women a leadership role, they do very well. But the thing is, we don't give enough leadership roles to women. And it's an unfair skew, because when you want to hire somebody with experience, there are not enough women with that kind of experience. So you end up hiring a man. If you hire a woman saying, "Okay, I won't insist on so much experience," then the woman needs to build that experience. And while she's building the experience, if she makes a mistake, then immediately people pounce on you saying, "Look, you hired this woman and look how bad she is." And you're saying, "Look, but she has to learn. She has to learn that experience. I'm giving her that chance." So I think you have to be a bit bold about your gender diversity issues.
One of the interesting questions, we'll move a little bit to business, is on Biocon. You've obviously built a very successful business and a company. So what would you advise, as you built your business, that people should do from a culture perspective and to keep this entrepreneurship going?
See, it's very obvious that, as you build a company and as the company grows larger and larger, it's very difficult to create a flat organization. People create their own hierarchies. I always don't want a hierarchy, and that's my biggest failing. I somehow am not being able to build a completely flat organization because people love hierarchy. And my real message to everyone is, see how much you can keep that company flat. See, I mean, it's very difficult because people love titles. People love to know that they're at a certain level. And I always say, can we keep very few levels and get everyone in those levels? It's not possible. because human beings are psychologically made a certain way. But I would say that the way to build a good culture is to really get people to own responsibilities, to own problems, to solve problems. I really think getting people to own responsibilities and be accountable for those responsibilities builds strong organizations.
Okay, thank you. And this is a question from Chicago. Women are in fact far better than men in so many areas. What are the areas in your opinion that businesses should leverage them? Like in your business or any others that you've been part of?
I agree with that. That's also a gender loaded question. I think men and women are very good at what they do. I don't want to say men are better or women are better, but I do believe that women are very empathetic. For instance, when you look at a crisis like COVID, I think women tend to understand the need for being sensitive to family needs. You know, like if somebody is test positive with COVID, you know, how many men will reach out and call them and say, how are you doing, or how's everything? I think it comes naturally to women. In fact, I often, all my colleagues who I've known who have tested positive, I actually pick up the phone and ask them, how are you feeling? Don't feel scared to reach out to me, because if you feel anything, I can tell you what to do, because I've been through it myself. I know what it's all about. Don't get scared. So I've actually called up a lot of my colleagues and allayed their fears. I don't know how many how many men leaders would do that for their colleagues, you know, because it comes naturally to us.
So, Kiran, moving to the last 5 minutes of questions. As a philanthropist, tell us a little more about what you're doing and how you feel we can all be inspired by that to do more.
I've always believed that when you become successful, when you create this huge wealth, it's not yours, okay? It's something that you've created with effort, collective effort, and you have to give back to your community, because you have to give them a helping hand as well. I've always believed that you have to give back to community. My late father always told me that money is not a currency with which to buy favors or have an advantage in life. Money is a currency to make a difference to society and to the lives of others who are less fortunate than you. I think that has always stayed in my mind for ever since I was a young child. So to me, I've always been philanthropic, because I feel when you invest in your own community, it actually helps you a lot, because you feel better. You know, I remember, why did I build a cancer hospital? Because I tell you, Bangalore did not have a good cancer hospital. So I said, look, we must have a good cancer hospital. And I said, I must do it with someone who knows how to build a hospital. So I went to Dr. Devi Shetty and I said, if I build a cancer hospital for you, will you run it? And he said, of course I would. So that's how I built that cancer hospital. Now I'm trying to, rescue lakes around us. Why is it important? Because I want my environment around me to be beautiful, to be lush, to be pollution free. You know, how do you do all that? So you invest in all that. And I have the influence, I have the money. Why can't I use it for such good use, so that, people feel that I haven't been selfish, that I haven't been exclusive, that I've been inclusive in terms of what I've done with my wealth. So I think it's very important. I mean, as people, obviously all of us have come from very, very humble, frugal beginnings. But many of us have also had the good fortune of, getting to where we are today. And we are in positions of influence. We have, wealth that can actually make a difference to other people's lives. I mean, look at the way we dealt with those migrant labor. It broke my heart. I mean, look at those people who didn't know where to go, how to survive, what to do. And we just stood back and, acted as if to say, oh, let's give them some food. Let's give them this. I mean, that is not what they wanted. They wanted money to go home and to travel on those trains or buses. And that's why I felt that giving them a ticket or buying, giving them money to make those journeys was so important. And they didn't want it as a, as alms, if you know what I mean. It is because we owed them that respect. So I just feel that as a society, as a community, you can be very aspirational about wealth, but that aspiration is about hard-earned money. You have to work for it, and you have to work for it with integrity. And the moment you work for wealth creation with integrity, you will know that it's only right to give back to society and to the community.
Said beautifully. There's a very interesting question, which I'm sure you face in Biocon and otherwise also. How does one handle a male boss who is biased towards men?
Male bosses?
Who are biased towards men, who don't want to work with women?
Well, I push them very hard. I almost give them performance ratings based on how many women they have in their teams.
That's one way of driving change, right? That's one way of driving change. Yeah. Geeta, do you have anything you want to ask? You're on mute, Geeta.
There's a very beautiful comment here. Before I give it to Geeta, there's a beautiful comment I just want to mention.
Go ahead.
Somebody says, you inspired me to take biotech 20 years ago. And today you have filled me with new energy when I'm feeling drained.
Oh, great.
Love and huge respect.
Great, go for it. I mean, biology is the most fascinating area. And today's, it is the age of, living machines, which is what biology is all about.
Over to you, Geeta.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, this has been so inspiring in so many different levels. It's, I'm going to start off by saying it's so wonderful to have so many of you with us on this special occasion. And I want to offer a few words of thanks to various people before I get to Kiran and Hema. First of all, I'm so thankful to my late father for his vision really at the time, 20 years ago, in starting the Dr. Lalita Iyer Center for Development for Women and this annual lecture series. He, as has been mentioned before, observed how my mom was really attempted to empower women in all walks of life and, in every way that she could, and wanted to continue that work. And that's what drove him to start the center and the lecture series. I really wish he could have witnessed this amazing conversation between the two of you. He would have been so inspired and would have loved hearing all that you have to say. None of all this could have happened without the Ahmedabad Management Association. And I want to give particular thanks, besides Mr. Radia, to Mr. K.K. Nair, who's been with us through the entire time and really the force behind all of these lectures, as well as the center and all it takes to sustain it. Thank you for that and for hosting the lecture today. Our big thanks to you for all the planning that went into it. And now on to Kiran and Hema. I don't know what to say. It was just mind-blowing hearing your life story, Kiran, and Hema, you brought it out so well. I loved particular aspects that I'd never heard before. Kiran, your definition of mentorship was so unusual in how you defined a mentor as someone who you could have wonderful discussions and brainstorm with. I think that's so very true. Loved your ideas about getting women out there and speaking up. I myself have seen in meetings that women tend to be more diffident, and love your thoughts on that and how we can be a little bolder out there. And finally, your father's phrase really resonated with me when you said, money is a currency to make a difference in the lives of others. And I can see you doing that. That is so powerful. You are truly a total package in all that you do and have done for your organization, for yourself, for your family, as well as for the world at large. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. This has been amazing.
It's been wonderful, and thank you, Govind and Geeta. And
I also want to also thank everyone who's made the time to come and attend yet another Zoom event, as we've talked about how Zoom has taken over our lives and our days. Thank you so much to everyone.
And thank you, Hema, for such a lively conversation.
Thank you. We had more than 300 participants going, I think 298 to be precise. So adding all of us up about 300. So thank you all, really. I'm overwhelmed.
Thank you.
Speaking to, Govind and Geeta, a family from, many, many decades ago.
Yeah.
And Mr. Radia, and, it's a pleasure anytime to catch up with Kiran. So
Yes.
all in all, it has been a really lovely 1.5 hours for me.
And Mr. Radia, thank you so much for, hosting this.
It's always a pleasure, and we will have you on another appropriate forum, please. And be aware that AMA has been, doing a lot of good work over the years, and we were awarded the Best Management Association about 16 times. So we are not in a metro category, but it's always proud to be associated with AMA. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. PVRN Iyer has mentored so many people and influenced people like me also to be close to AMA. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Govind.
Thank you
all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Govind. Thank you.
Sahib, there he is,
Thank
Dr.
you very much.
The man in the background.
Hema, thanks so much.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Yeah. Wonderful, Govind. Good participation.
Thank you very much.
No, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us. Whoever can hear us. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all.